morning, good afternoon, good day, students, whenever it is that you are watching this video, and hopefully much more than just one time. Thank you so much for joining me and accessing this video for extra support on the content for NST1501. Just a bit of an introduction in case you haven't watched any of my previous videos. I am Miss J. Broadhurst, and I'm the lecturer for NST1501, which is a second level module in possibly B.Ed or higher certificate, whichever one you are enrolled for. So previous videos have been completed on other content. This video is going to be completed on tissue organs and the circulatory system. I try to keep my videos nice and short so that it isn't tedious to watch it when you are completing a certain section in your assignments or when you are studying for the exam. So I'm going to start off. Okay, so I'm going to start off with going through the different types of tissues that are covered in your study guide and on the online study material. We go through connective tissue, muscle tissue, nerve tissue, and epithelial tissue. But I'll go through each different type of tissue in a little bit more detail. So starting with connective tissue. So connective tissue is tissue that connects, support, binds, or separates other tissues or organs. It contains many common fibers found in a matrix, like collagen, for example. So you can find this normally at your joints, in your ligaments, basically joining different types of structures within your body. A lot of it you can find under the layers of your skin. And another example is the three meninges that surround the brain and the spinal cord. All three of these meninges are made up of a certain type of connective tissue. We then go on to muscle tissue. So muscle tissue is tissues that apply forces to different parts of the body by contractions. Now you get different types of muscle tissue. The most obvious, the one that we can physically see, is the tissue that you find in our skeletal muscles. We call it skeletal or striated muscle, and we are actually in control of these muscles, and we can contract and relax them as needed. You also get smooth or non-striated muscle and cardiac muscle. So cardiac and smooth muscle contract involuntarily. So you would find them around our heart, around our digestive tract, and in other systems in our body. The little structure picture there will show you that skeletal muscle, you could find it, and that location is of the legs, so like in the femur, in the thigh muscle. Smooth muscle you would find in your digestive tract, for example, covering your organs, covering your intestines, so that when your intestines contract, the food can move down in your digestive system. So these are all smooth muscles, and we don't control the contraction and the relaxation of these muscles. So at no point do we ever have to tell our throat or our intestines or our heart, for example, to beat or to move the blood or move the food. This is done involuntarily and is controlled by a certain part in our brain. And then cardiac muscle, the word cardiac must always make you think of heart. So cardiac muscle is found around your heart, and it's quite strong, and it's what controls the rhythmic beating of your heart and the pumping of the blood around your body. Then the nerve tissue. So nerve tissue is present in the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So the different types of nerve tissue that you get are neurons and neuroglia, and I've put some pictures there. So neuroglia is also called glial cells, and they support neurons. And a neuron regulates and controls the bodily functions and activity as a result of a stimulus. So it would help you react to a stimulus, such as touching something hot. Your neuron picks up the stimulus that, oh, hold on, it's hot. Let me react and cause the muscles to pull away. So it picks up stimulus like touch, what you see, what you hear, that is nerve tissue. And it also then can stimulate the contraction of muscles, like I was saying, reacting to a certain stimulus, telling you to move. It's dangerous, it's hot, it's cold, you're going to bump your head or something like that. And it also plays a role in emotions and memory and reasoning. If you had to go into more detail about the brain and the different lobes, you would understand the different roles of the different kinds of nerves and parts of your brain. And then we get epithelial tissue. So this is another tissue that, well, I think it's the easily seeable and notable tissue because it lines the outer surfaces of organs and blood vessels, as well as the inner surfaces of cavities and internal organs. But our skin is made up of a form of epithelial tissue. So you get 4 different types of epithelial tissue based on shape. We get simple squamous, simple cuboidal, simple columnar, and stratified squamous. So there's actually only 3 different types of shapes, but when we talk about squamous tissue, we can talk about simple. Now, if you look at the diagram, you'll see simple squamous is quite flat and irregular shaped, where stratified squamous has many different layers, stratifications of cells. So stratified squamous can sometimes just fall under squamous tissue. And then we get simple columnar and simple cuboidal. Columnar, they look like columns, and cuboidal, they look like cubes. And as mentioned, you can see it in your skin, your lungs, the lining of your lungs, and your alveoli to allow for gaseous exchange, as well as in your kidney tubules and pretty much all over your body surrounding all the organs. Okay, so then we want to move on to the first system that we find in our body. So remember, cells, which was a previous video recorded, cells make tissues. Tissues make organs, and organs together will work together in different systems. So the circulatory system is just one of the systems in our body. We have the digestive system, we have the excretory system, we have the endocrine system, but I'm specifically focusing on the circulatory system in this video. So the circulatory system, the main organ within this system is your heart. So it's the transport system of the body, and it composes of the blood, the heart, and then the blood vessels that the blood moves around the body in. Not only is this system about transporting blood around your body, but it's also about supplying nutrients and removing waste products from various tissues in your body. Now, a very, very important reason why blood is moved around our body is because it contains nutrients. More specifically, blood contains oxygen, and we need oxygen right through our body in all our organs in order for them to function. And then once, if you think back on onto cellular respiration, we will remember that cellular respiration is about breaking down the glucose and it releases carbon dioxide. So that carbon dioxide that is released needs to be taken out of our body. And blood removes this carbon dioxide from the different places in your body and takes it to the lungs where we can actually breathe it out. So the breathing in and the breathing out isn't just about air, but it also needed to remove the oxygen, remove the carbon dioxide from your blood. So the conveying media is liquid in the form of blood, which flows in a closed tubular system. We have a closed circulatory system because all our blood is contained within blood vessels. So function of the cardiovascular or the circulatory system is to transport nutrients and hormones and to remove waste products for gaseous exchange, for immunity, as the different blood cells carry the different immune cells, and that's also a little bit more in a different system that we'll go into detail. And then mainly blood vessels transport blood. So it carries oxygen and carbon dioxide, which also carries nutrients and waste. And then the heart pumps the blood through the blood vessels. So all great and well, we could have this blood contained in all our blood vessels. But if there's no mechanism to pump it, to give it the little bit of oomph that it needs to move around the body, which is the heart that does that, the blood is never going to move, which means the oxygen is never going to reach the tissues and the organs, and the carbon dioxide is never going to be removed. So blood. So the blood is made up of blood cells and plasma. So the different blood cells that we get are erythrocytes, leukocytes, and thrombocytes. So erythrocytes are our red blood cells. And then plasma is the fluid portion of blood. So all of these are found within plasma. And then the heart. So a heart is a four-chambered, hollowed muscular organ approximately the size of your fist. The location is in the superior surface of the diaphragm. So if you think of where your diaphragm is, it is above your diaphragm. It is left of the midline, so left of your sternum, basically. And it's anterior to the vertebral column and posterior to the sternum. So in front of the vertebral column and behind the sternum, and it's quite protected. It is in the space, surrounded by other organs, surrounded by the rib cage and all of that. So this is the structure of the heart. If we look at the heart, and there's a little diagram that I'll show you soon as well, you need to flip the heart, because remember, if you think of it on yourself, you have the left-hand side and the right-hand side. But when you look at a diagram, they have just plonked it there, but you are facing it. So now you've got to think of it the other way around, that the right is actually on the left-hand side and the left is actually on the right-hand side of a diagram on your screen. So let's start on the left-hand side of your screen, which is the right-hand side of the heart. You can see it is blue in color. Now, this doesn't mean that it's actually blue in your eye. We use blue to show deoxygenated blood and red to show oxygenated blood in the flow of blood in the heart. So on the right-hand side of the heart, you can see the pulmonary artery right at the top. Now, whenever you see the word pulmonary, please think of lungs. So that pulmonary artery is going to the lungs. Now, there's something special you must identify about this. A pulmonary artery is the only artery that carries deoxygenated blood, because all your other arteries, which I'm going to speak to soon, carry oxygenated blood. So the pulmonary artery is going to the lungs from the heart, and it's carrying deoxygenated blood. Now, the reason why it's going to the lungs is because we need to go drop off the carbon dioxide so we can breathe it out, get some new oxygen, and then let it be transported around the body, the different blood vessels. So you can almost think of it as like a system of you driving around in a like Uber. So now we've just spoken about, we're in the Uber, we're carrying a lot of carbon dioxide in our blood, and we need to go drop it off. So we can't just drop it off anywhere in the body because it's going to become toxic for the body. So we go in the pulmonary artery to the lungs, where the carbon dioxide is dropped off and breathed out, and oxygen jumps in. New, fresh, oxygenated blood is then ready to be moved around the body. Okay, I think I'm actually going in the order of, let's rather, instead of focus on one side, let's go in the order of how the blood moves. So it's gone now to the lungs. The lungs has gone and dropped off the carbon dioxide. It's become oxygenated again. But now, and if you have a look, you'll see that there's actually two pulmonary arteries, because you have two lungs. So it needs to go to either side of the lung. So you can see it underneath the aorta branch, there's two pulmonary arteries because it branches like that. When the blood comes back to the heart, like I said, it's now oxygenated. You were driving in your Uber, picked up oxygenated blood, and it needs to enter the heart, and we call those vessels that it enters the heart in the pulmonary veins. Now, again, these are special because veins normally carry deoxygenated blood, but now they are carrying oxygenated blood. So pulmonary from the lungs, veins into the heart. So there you can see it if you look on the left-hand side of your heart, right-hand side of your screen. You can see the pulmonary veins, there's two of them entering the heart. So where does it enter the heart? It enters the heart, like I said, it's on the left-hand side, and the chamber that's on the top, remember we said the heart has 4 chambers. The chamber that is at the top is called the left atrium. So the blood enters the left atrium. The atrium is smaller than the ventricle. You can see the ventricle goes down towards the bottom of the heart. So it enters the left atrium, and from the left atrium, it needs to move down into the left ventricle. But before it moves down, it moves through a little valve, and that valve is called the atrioventricular valve. You can also remember it as the bicuspid valve. Okay, the blood is now in the left ventricle, and it needs to move. It can't just stay in the heart, it needs to move around the body. So it leaves the left ventricle of the heart, if you follow the arrow, and it goes through the semilunar valve up into the aorta. Now the aorta is quite strong, quite thick, quite big, as it is now carrying oxygenated blood right through your body. And you see it's got an aortic branch. It comes around like that, and it's got different arteries branching out of the aorta, and it goes up and like behind the heart, and it takes some blood all over your body, because all your organs, from down to your toe to the top of your head, all needs oxygen in the blood. So the oxygen then goes to these, it gets transported in the aorta, which branches into smaller arteries, and then it branches into smaller capillaries, and it diffuses into the tissues. These tissues use up all the oxygen that's in the blood, and the blood now it picks up carbon dioxide, because when oxygen is used, carbon dioxide is formed, and the carbon dioxide is now picked up in blood vessels. These blood vessels are called veins, and these veins need to head back to the heart. It's time to go drop off the carbon dioxide. But now remember, we don't drop off the carbon dioxide in the heart, but we first go check in at the heart, get some more energy, because remember, the heart can pump. So we check in at the heart, which then takes us to the lungs again. So the blood moves around the body, and it makes its way up to the heart. And you can see there now we're looking at the left-hand side of your screen and the right-hand side of the heart. And you can see there the thicker little veins, which are called the posterior and the superior, well, it could be called the anterior vena cava. So what this is talking about is the biggest, strongest vein in your body, which carries all the blood from the heart, from the body up to the heart. Now, why is there one at the bottom and at the top? Is because blood needs to come from the bottom of your body as well as above your heart too. So your shoulders and your head and all of that. So the blood now is at the heart. It enters the heart through the posterior and anterior vena cava into the right atrium. Whether you can see it's the right atrium again is at the top. Remember, we have the atriums and the ventricles. The atriums are higher, the ventricles are near the bottom. And the ventricles are almost more shaped like a V than the atriums. So it enters the right atrium, it's deoxygenated. It now needs to make its way to the lungs. It moves from the right atrium down through the atrioventricular valve, which is the tricuspid valve as well, into the right ventricle, and it moves around the right ventricle up through the semilunar valve, and it goes back into the pulmonary veins, which is, the pulmonary artery, which is now our starting point. Very easy to confuse pulmonary vein and artery, because you always think of a vein carrying deoxygenated, but remember, pulmonary vein carries oxygenated blood. So we are now in the pulmonary artery, which was our starting point. The blood has now reached that point, it now moves again to the lungs and the whole process can start over. So you can be asked to describe the flow of the blood at any specific starting point. So I can ask you to start like we did at the pulmonary artery, or I can ask you to start at the left ventricle. Blood is continuously flowing in our body, so it doesn't have a starting point and an ending point. So wherever you are asked to explain it from, that is your starting point. So I've been mentioning arteries and veins and capillaries quite a bit, but let's just have a look at the structure of an artery. So an artery is a blood vessel that carries blood away from the heart. It is the thickest and it carries blood which is high in oxygen, as we call it oxygenated blood because it's oxygen-rich blood. You'll see the structure of an artery on the right side there. All I want you to pay attention to is how thickly walled it is, as the blood that moves inside an artery is at quite a high pressure. So the artery needs to be quite strong. So arteries are accompanied by veins and nerves. The lumen is small in a artery. Lumen is in an artery, that's the gap. It's quite small because most of the space is taken up by the muscles on the outside. It has no valves. The blood is moving at a high pressure, so it doesn't need any valves to keep it in place. And it's got repeated branching. It always branches out into a whole lot of different arteries, and then arterioles, which are smaller arteries, and then from arterioles into capillaries. So capillaries, they are the smallest blood vessels, and they connect the arteries and the veins, and this is where the exchange of the nutrients and gases occurs. So we basically streamline our blood into smaller blood vessels, and these are called capillaries. A capillary doesn't specifically only carry oxygenated or deoxygenated blood, but it carries whatever is needed at that time, and this is where the diffusion happens from oxygenated blood to deoxygenated blood. It's within the tiny little capillaries. If you are perhaps looking at sometimes on your face, you'll see the tiny little blood vessels that come through, not necessarily the veins on your hands, but the tiny little blood vessels. The reason why I'm saying specifically on your face is because your face, the blood vessels is quite close to the surface and the skin is quite thin. That's why it's quite easy to see the capillaries there. Where these veins in your hands, on good days or on some days you may be able to see them, sometimes not. They aren't as close to the surface. And then veins. So blood vessels that carry blood back to the heart are called veins, because in a way, we want to say that a vein carries deoxygenated blood, but we know it's not always true because of the pulmonary vein. So they have valves in them, one-way valves, which prevent the blood from flowing backwards, because the blood in a vein is not at such high pressure, it's not moving as fast, and it can almost like run out of energy, especially when it's working against gravity. So it's got these blood vessels, these valves to prevent it from flowing backwards. They carry blood that is high in carbon dioxide, which we know as deoxygenated blood. Then veins are thin-walled. They have a large irregular lumen, that's the gap within them. They have valves. They have dead space around them. And you get large, medium, small veins. And we spoke about that when we spoke about the vena cava being a large vein. Okay, and then our circulation in our body is we divide it into two things, not to say that at one thing happens and then the next one. It's constantly happening the whole time. We get the pulmonary circulation, which is the flow of blood between the heart and the lungs. So this is just about the heart and the lungs, forgetting that the rest of the body needs blood, but focusing between pulmonary arteries, pulmonary veins, lungs, and heart. Where the systemic circulation is the flow of blood between the heart and the cells of the body. So this is about moving from our home of the blood, our heart, down to the rest of the body, dropping off oxygen, picking up carbon dioxide, getting rid of waste, nutrients, and providing immunity, where pulmonary circulation is about taking the oxygen from the air that we breathe in and releasing the carbon dioxide, the air that we breathe out. But none of that happens without the heart. Then this is just another diagram, and it's the last one. See, I've labeled it again as well. Left-hand side on the right-hand side of your screen, right-hand side on the left-hand side of your screen. And this just talks about oxygen-rich blood and where you see the oxygen-rich. So you can see oxygen-rich is primarily on the left-hand side of the heart, right-hand side of your screen, where oxygen-poor or deoxygenated blood is on the left-hand side of your screen, right-hand side of the heart. The heart is separated, so the 4 chambers are separated, and then the middle is also separated, and that is called a septum, and your heart is also covered by protective covering that has cardiac muscle in it. Thank you very much, students, and I hope that the lesson today was beneficial and that you learned something from it. Until next time, goodbye.